Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is John Campea, and this is our special open spoiler discussion of Loki Episode 5. In case the title doesn't give it away, this is going to be all spoilers for Loki Episode 5 that, of course, aired on Tuesday at midnight or Wednesday morning, depending on where you live. Now, we did this, at least we tried to do this open spoiler discussion on Wednesday. This is now being recorded on Thursday. And we ran into a slew of technical problems. So I just kind of gave up on it and decided we would do it here today. So a bunch of you guys have sent in comments and questions and thoughts and theories. I gathered those all up, and we are going to address them here now on our spoiler discussion. Now, we're going to spend most of our time here today talking about your observations, thoughts, and opinions and speculations about Loki Episode 5. But we'll start things off here just quickly with me giving you my impressions. So, a couple of things that I thought would happen happened, and a number of things that I thought would happen did not happen. For instance, I really thought we would meet the person behind, and we should have. We should have met the person behind the curtain, I should say, in Episode 5, setting up the final episode to be all of our resolution, but they didn't do that. So we still have not met the person I really thought we didn't. Also, you guys remember when we were doing the pregame show, I said, now I was told that Ms. Minutes did not appear in anything other than episode 1 and 2. And I told you guys, I said, it's not a very reliable source, and my apologies to the person who I know is watching this who told me, but I wasn't 100% sure because the person who told me wasn't exactly the most reliable source. But then episode 3 came and went without Ms. Minutes, and episode 4 came and went without Ms. Minutes. So I was starting to believe, okay, yeah, I guess it really looks like we're not going to get Ms. Minutes. But then again, of course, she does appear in this episode, so there's that too. Overall, I thought the episode was a little bit disappointing. Not tremendously disappointing like episode 3 was, but I would count this as the 4th best out of the 5 episodes so far. Well, let me talk about some of the highlights, though. Number 1, Richard E. Grant as the classic-looking Loki. Awesome. I thought he was great. I mean, Richard E. Grant is always great, but I really thought that was great, especially that last part when he's, when Aelith is coming at him, he's like, glorious purpose, and laughing in the face of doom. That was awesome. So he was a highlight throughout the whole thing. A lot of great Easter eggs. Actually, I would go so far as to say that I think it's pretty safe to say that this episode of Loki probably had more Easter eggs in it than any episode of MCU Disney Plus show. That, like anything that we got from WandaVision, that we got from Falcon Winter Soldier, I think this one episode had more than any other episode. Everything from, Ronan the Accuser's ship, to Frog Thor, to a Mjolnir appearance, and obviously the granddaddy of them all, the Thanos copter. The Thanos copter was there, which was pretty damn hilarious. I thought that was great. So tons of Easter eggs all over the place. That was good. Also, everything about Loki that has to do with him on his journey of self-realization, understanding who he is, has been the highlight of this show. And there was a great moment in this episode when Sylvie and him are talking, and Loki, again, coming more to self-realization, saying that line he said where he says, I've betrayed everyone who's ever loved me. My brother, my father, I mean, on and on, right? And he says, that's not who I am anymore. I believe in that line. What we saw was the completion of the journey. Because this is what I've been saying. I believe Loki, because remember, this is the same Loki that we've had in the rest of the MCU. It's the exact same Loki, right up until Avengers, right? Now, after the first Avengers movie, Loki then had, a number of years and several movies and things like that to go through this character evolution to come to a point where he and his brother were now bonded again. He actually sacrificed himself to save his brother and all that kind of stuff. In Loki, what we've had is an acceleration of that evolution. And I believe at that moment in episode 5, when he says to Sylvie, and he says, I've betrayed everyone that's ever loved me, but that's not who I am anymore. I believe we saw the completion of that journey of Loki going from the events of Avengers to where he was when he died in Infinity War. And that journey to get to that place of self-actualization and realization and who he is as a character and that evolution came to a completion in that moment with Sylvie. So I thought that was great. But still, overall, I thought it was lackluster. Number one, I think it was a major mistake to not introduce us to our ultimate antagonist in the second to last episode. So now, because what they should have done was introduce us to that in the second last episode, then the final episode can just be all resolution now. The battle against whatever that thing is. But now we got to spend the last episode discovering who the villain is in the first place. And I thought that was a mistake. Also, all the stuff with the different Lokis was kind of a waste. Like, one of their main points of marketing in the Loki series has been that President Loki image, you know, the Loki, vote Loki stuff. That was all over the place. And he had like, what, 2 or 3 lines, and then a really bad fight between all those Loki variants that honestly felt about as intense as the 1960s Adam West Batman series. All that was missing was pow, boom. That's all that was missing for that. So I thought that was ultimately pretty disappointing. Alligator Loki was also pretty good. But yeah, I mean, overall, I just felt it was a bit of a lackluster episode. Again, nowhere near as disappointing as episode 3. Had some definite highlights to it. But at least now we can look forward to episode 6. And I think that episode is going to be gangbusters. Okay. With my thoughts now being down, guys, let's move over and start taking your live comments and questions. Now, for those of you who were watching live when we tried to do this the other day, some of these questions we got through, so you're going to hear me answering it again. That's okay. I just want to make sure everybody who sent in their questions gets answered. So let's not waste any time and get right into it. And we're going to start things off here with Ismael Montoya, who writes, "Hey, John, one of two. I like the Loki series all the way up to where I felt Marvel was trying really hard to impose a story that will describe Loki and lead us into the future MCU supervillain. After episode 2, this Loki story doesn't feel as genuine as WandaVision did. Thoughts?" I disagree. Now, I can see why you're saying that, but again, you have to understand my perception of this entire series. To me, this series is about the journey of Loki and the character evolution of Loki. And like, I've heard some people saying like, oh, this show is more about Sylvie. No, it's not. I mean, Sylvie doesn't even really become a real character until episode 3 of it. But even then, Sylvie is a device in the show to become one of the sparks and one of those things that pushes along Loki's character arc and character development. She is a very worthy character in and of herself, but she's also a plot device that's spurring this hastened evolution of Loki's character. So even Sylvie is just another device there to help tell the story of Loki and his character evolution. So yes, they'll bring in a big bad, and yes, Sylvie's a big character, and obvious Mobius is a great character, but if you really look at every single episode, this is a show about Loki and his character transformation. At least that's how I interpret it. So yeah, so I disagree a little bit, and not that I'm trying to undermine or discount your opinion on it. Not at all. I'm just saying that's just kind of the way I see it. All right, thanks for sending that in, Ismail. All right, next up, we've got Suthius, who writes, "Loki and Sylvie falling for each other really works for me. First time for both, so of course they're going to be a little awkward with conversing like 2 teenagers. I was the same way in high school." I'm going to disagree with you on that, Suthius, in the sense that it doesn't work for me. There is something inherently, I'm going to say it, there's something inherently gross about this romance. They are 2 versions of the same person. They're the same person. I joked about it in episode 2 or 3, but it's true. It's just, if they start fooling around, all it is glorified masturbation. I mean, that's really what it is. Having sex with oneself. So on that level, I find it rather gross. Now, I will agree with you, though, that as far as 2K, remember, Loki has been with many sexual partners, but he's never had genuine care and affection for any of them. And so this kind of being his first love, I agree. The dialogue between them, the awkwardness and stuff like that, it does work. I agree with you on that. Okay, next up, we've got Hero75, who writes, one of 3. "While I like this episode, it didn't feel like the second to last episode, which has led me to this crazy idea. What if we don't get a true ending?" By the way, I agree with you. It didn't feel like a true second to last episode anyway. But at the end of the series, right before the big battle, it cuts to black. during the end credit scene, Doctor Strange and Wanda showing up. That's not going to happen. Where's 3 of 3? 3 of 3. In the same room as Loki and Sylvie with the words that they will return in Doctor Strange 2. All right. I got to say that no, I don't believe that. I don't think that's going to happen at all, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, you cannot do a series like this and have a cliffhanger ending. You can't do that. That will piss off the audience. The audience who is committed, followed along with you for these 6 episodes in these 6 weeks, looking for a completion to the story. Now, obviously, like WandaVision, Captain America, or Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they're still open-ended at the end, but they come to a conclusion and a finish of the story they were telling, with then open doors to move the characters forward and other things. You cannot do a show like this and then get to episode 6, the finale, and actually not have the ending of the story you've been telling. You can't do that. So yes, they will have a definitive ending with open doors that can lead to other things. Now, the second thing about that is I don't believe we're going to see Doctor Strange and Wanda. And the reason for that is this. It's called Loki Vision, not Loki, Doctor Strange, and WandaVision. It's called Loki, not those things. So when you look back to WandaVision, everybody swore, oh, Doctor Strange is going to show up. Doctor Strange is going to show up. Doctor Strange is going to show up. And of course, Doctor Strange doesn't come because the show is called WandaVision. It's about Wanda and Vision. It's not Wanda, Vision, and Doctor Strange. When we got into Falcon and Winter Soldier and it became clear everything was heading to New York, a bunch of people like, Spider-Man's going to be there because Spider-Man lives in New York. Spider-Man's going to be there. And then Spider-Man wasn't there. And everybody's like, well, why wasn't Spider-Man there? Because the show is called Falcon and Winter Soldier, not Falcon, Winter Soldier, and Spider-Man. They have been making a point to keep a laser focus on these shows being about their characters and not throwing it open. Not everything is an Avengers show, right? These are the individual stories of these individual characters. So now, is it impossible that we see, Doctor Strange and Wanda show up? It's not impossible. I mean, nothing is impossible. I mean, we could see Thanos show up. Hell, we could see Batman show up. Anything's possible. But if you look at the pattern and the way they've handled the other 2 series, and it would just be a rando out of nowhere thing for them to show up, I don't believe at all that we're going to see Doctor Strange and Wanda. Again, not completely impossible. So there's that, but I really don't think so. It just wouldn't be in line with the way they've done these shows so far. But that's just me. All right, next up we got Suthius, who writes, I laughed so hard at President Loki scream. Are you talking about when Alligator Loki bit his hand off? That was pretty funny. Again, I still thought the whole scene was kind of a waste, but that was kind of a funny moment. All right, Remmer Bulldog writes, I like this episode of a lot. You probably didn't mean to say of. I like this episode a lot, especially the ending. The only thing I was disappointed in was no post-credit scene to tease who is coming. The TVA, other than that, I enjoyed it, and I'm hyped for episode 6. Yeah, I am also hyped for episode 6. A little disappointed with this thing overall. But you raise up a good point about the post-credit scene. Because in WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they didn't have post-credit scenes, but once they did have a post-credit scene, then the rest of the episodes did too. And obviously in episode 4, we had a post-credit scene. So we weren't crazy to think that we were going to get post-credit scenes in episode 5 and 6, and they didn't. So that was a little bit of a surprise to me, just for sure. All right, next up, we've got Unjustified Gaming, who writes, Part 1. John, how are you? I'm fine, thank you. This episode was insanity in terms of Easter eggs. It absolutely was. And foreshadowing into next episode. I loved the O to the Living Tribunal. Do you mean the Ode to the Living Tribunal? Yeah, because that was an Easter egg too. We saw the giant head on the beach, right? With the statue head in the background right before Alioth conflict. Also, they included Alioth. Yep. I never saw that coming. They are laying so much groundwork. By the way, guys, do me a favor. When we're doing the live shows, if you have a multi-part message to send in, write it all out first in a notepad or something like that. So then you can quickly just copy and paste the chunks in so I don't have to hunt all over the place for your next installment. Just a quick little request. That's all. Anyway, so much groundwork for Kang with the major Easter eggs and plot points that have been hinting at since the start. So much that it reaffirms My theory I submitted last week that a superior Loki is working as the herald for Kang. I don't believe it affirms that at all. I don't think we are getting that at all, but that's just me. I feel like all of this is a big setup for a Thanos-like, oh boy, introduction to the MCU as the big bad, and that He Who Remains themed Loki is going to give us our final battle, plus a glimpse into who Kang is as a character in our rendition of the MCU. I also think we are going to see Kid Loki return in the finale. The banter between classic Loki, Kid Loki, the Loki Gator, and Boastful Loki made the episode for me. Yeah, it was iffy. Over under 50%, we see Mjolnir and or Throg in a bottle come into Loki in the finale. I say pretty much zero. Not absolute zero, but pretty much zero. I also don't agree at all that we're going to get another Loki who is a herald of Kang. You got to remember, we've only got one episode left, right? We literally only have one episode left. There's only so much they can do. So I don't think so. But you did point out something that I forgot to mention in my introduction. And that is, if you go back and watch the pregame show that we did for episode 5, I said, you know what? I'm still on the fence about who the person behind the curtain is. I think there's a 1/3 chance that it's Kang, a 1/3 chance that it's a Loki variant, and a 1/3 chance that it's anybody else. But after watching this episode, I now feel like there's an 80% chance that it's Kang. Because, which has been a theory that's been around since episode 1, but when you look at Alioth is connected to Kang in the comics. That castle is probably the Void Castle, which is connected to Kang in the comics. Obviously, with all the stuff with Ravonna, that's been a big part of that as well. So all these things coming together, I think now I've gotten off the fence. I no longer think it's an even split between somebody, Loki variant, or Kang. I now think it's an 80% chance it's Kang, 10% chance it's a Loki variant, 10% chance it's somebody else. I do not think we're getting a herald. And by the way, I don't think Kang is the next big bad guy. I think Kang is going to be a big bad guy, but I don't believe he's like the next Thanos. Because I don't believe you introduce him in the last episode of an individual show on Disney Plus and then have him appear in Ant-Man 3. I don't think that's your next Thanos. Now, it might be. So I think he'll be a significant villain in the MCU, Kang, over the next year or two, maybe 3. But I don't think he's the next Thanos. You know what I mean? So that's just kind of my take on it. But that's just a guess. That's just a pure guess. Could be totally wrong about that. And ask me how I feel about that after the finale of Loki, because I might have a totally different idea after that. All right, Hero75 writes, it is clear that Loki has never played Dungeons and Dragons. You never split the party with Mobius heading off to take down the TVA loan. He should have stayed. I completely agree. Now, well, I mean, on the one hand, what was Mobius going to be able to do? They were going to try to enchant Alioth, right? So there's nothing he can do to help there. But he probably should have stayed with him just to wait for them to finish their part so they could have gone with him back to the TVA, because now he's got to take on the TVA loan. So I agree. They should have kept the party together. I think you're right about that, Hero. All right, next up, Ismail Montoya writes, did you see the Frog Thor jumping towards Mjolnir? I did, but you want to know what? When I first saw it, I didn't think it was Frog Thor. I thought it was a little Beta Ray Bill. And like me and my buddy, even we paused it, we went up to the TV and looked closely, and I kind of thought it looked like he was very, very small, but I thought it looked like Beta Ray Bill. Obviously it wasn't. It is Frog Thor. It totally is. But yeah, that was really cool to see. All right, next up, we've got Suthius who writes, the hunter who pruned Mobius is the same one who said she pruned herself in regards to Sylvie. He seemed a little perplexed. Renslayer then says she's dead too, and he doesn't question it. It seems the TVA, especially the hunters, don't even exactly know what pruning does to people and things. Renslayer is the only one that knows. Well, listen, we have such an incomplete picture about what is it the TVA agents think, believe, and know. And I think they don't even have a complete picture of that. I mean, again, coming out of episode 4, one of the big questions about Ravonna was about, did she know all this already? But apparently it doesn't look like she did. It doesn't look like she knew those timekeepers were fake and that there's somebody behind it all. It seems like now she's on her own personal hunt to find out the truth about who's behind everything. So how does that extend to the rest of the TVA? I'm not really sure yet, but I think we're going to find out once we get into the last episode. All right, next up. See, I got to jump up and down and all over the place. Aaron Medina writes, Mobius needs a Loki army to start the revolution. I don't know, man. I think Mobius is dangerous because he knows all the inner workings of the TVA. If anybody can take it down single-handedly, it's probably going to be him. All right, next up, we've got David Zarnowski, who writes, Hey, John, if Kang is responsible, then why use the timekeepers as a disguise? And if it's actually another Loki, how did he create all that tech? That's one of the main reasons too why I don't think it's another Loki, that it is probably Kang who can do that. So the question is, okay, so why did Kang set up that puppet tribunal of timekeepers? Don't know. No idea. That's something they should have revealed in episode 5. They should have revealed Kang, if it is Kang. I'm kind of assuming it is at this point. But they should have, number one, revealed Kang. And number two, they should have revealed his motivations. You know, what's the motivation? Why did he do this in the first place? Why not just set himself up as the timekeeper? Why have this puppets, these 3 timekeeper puppets? I don't know. We'll probably find out in the final episode and, you know, then we'll go from there. All right. Thanks for that, David. Next up, Gabe Campbell writes, Richard E. Grant stole the episode for me. He kind of did. He was great in it. I love how animated he was and all over the top and all of the over-the-top moments. Can't wait for next week. Show me Kang. Yeah, and I think that's exactly what's coming. But again, Gabe, I agree with you. You know, in an episode that I was generally disappointed in, didn't hate it, just generally disappointed a little bit. It definitely had its highlights, and the biggest, most shining highlight was Richard E. Grant. I mean, he was great throughout. And I hope, because remember, he tells the story earlier on that when he had his encounter with Thanos, he was able to create an illusion, a projection of himself that was so convincing that even Thanos bought it and he got away. I'm kind of hoping that that story was a foreshadowing of what we saw, because we saw Alioth kill him, right? I'm hoping that was just another mirage, just like all of Asgard was a giant mirage for the creature. So I'm hoping that, because I really would like to see Richard E. Grant back again, because I thought he was great in that game. So I agree with you on that completely. All right, Entertain Nerd writes, right on the money on the Mobius thing on telling Loki to trust him. Everything was planned. By the way, I wish is Kang, but I believe it's another Loki. Well, yeah, so in the pregame show, we did talk about, I said, guys, you know, I went back and watched the episode again. Actually, a friend of mine pointed it out to me, to be fair. And so I went back and watched it again. It's like right before when Mobius went to get Loki out of his little time prison there, just before they walk through the portal where Ravonna was waiting for them, he says to Loki, do you trust me? So that meant, I think him getting pruned was part of the plan. I think he knew he was going to get pruned. And that's why I said to Loki before they went through the temp pad portal, I got a plan. Do you trust me? And it turns out that that's exactly what it was. So now, you believing it's actually going to be another Loki, there, to me, and by the way, you could be right. But to me, all the signs point to Kang. Again, everything from Alioth, who is connected to Kang in the comics, the Void Castle, Ravonna, it just seems more and more likely that it's actually Kang the Conqueror. So again, it's not 100%, but I'm going to stick on the 80% that it's Kang. So we'll see what they do with that Entertain Nerd. All right, next up. Aiden Atkins writes, G'day, mate. Do you think the big reveal would be Kang or He Who Remains? Love your work, buddy. Keep it up. Thank you so much, Aiden. And again, I've thought from episode 1 that there was definitely a possibility it was Kang. I was certainly not sold on that though. But especially after this episode, I am officially on board. Not 100%, but enough that I can say I am on board the Kang train. All the pieces of the puzzle seem to point to that. Just like in WandaVision, even though I didn't think she was going to end up being Agatha, all the signs did point to her being Agatha Harkness, and it turned out she was Agatha Harkness. So I think that's what they're doing here, and I do think it's actually Kang. All right, next up. Daryl Best Wadley writes, where are we at? There he is. Old Loki says how he survives Thanos. I feel like this Loki is the one we find in Ragnarok, and he uses that tactic to avoid being killed in Infinity War. I don't know what it is you're suggesting here. I feel like this Loki is the one we find in Ragnarok, and he uses that tactic to avoid being killed in Infinity War. I'm not sure what you mean. That's not what happened. So I'm just not clear on what you mean by that, because that is not the Loki we found in Ragnarok, and he does not avoid being killed in Infinity War. So I'm not quite sure what you're saying there, Dale. Anyway, maybe I'm just misunderstanding what you're writing. All right, next up, we got Suthius, who writes, whoever or whatever is behind the TVA, I'm glad they don't have the power for creation and destruction. They have power over time, good enough for me. And that is something I think a lot of us are overlooking here, Suthius. Whoever it is behind this, right? And I'm going on the assumption it's Kang the Conqueror, but maybe it's somebody else. But whoever it is, they have the power to create a place that they can go in and out of anywhere and any place in time and pull people out, including things like Infinity Stones, and depower Infinity Stones and all magical or supernatural or superpower abilities. Like, whoever is behind this is clearly very, very capable. And that's something to keep in mind, because next week, when they reveal Kang or whoever else it is, that individual had the ability to create the TVA, create a place that could even render Infinity Stones useless. This is a major threat, whoever it is, and I believe it's going to end up being Kang. All right, next up, we got Remner Bulldog, who writes, hey, John, for the finale for Loki, I'm hoping they make it the longest of the series so we can get all the answers without feeling so rushed. Thoughts? Well, honestly, Remner, we felt that way about every episode so far. We have wanted WandaVision's finale to be the longest. We've wanted Falcon and the Winter Soldier's finale to be the longest. The difference is that heading into the finales of WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we've known who the villains are. We've known the setup. All the motivations are set, and now the final episodes could just be for big resolution and bringing it all home, right? And that is why I really felt episode 5 of Loki should, at the very bare minimum, revealed the villain, what the villain's motivation is, so we can understand what's happening, so that the entire last episode can just be used to bring it all for the conflict and bring that conflict to resolution. So now they have a lot they have to accomplish in that final episode. So yeah, I hope it's the longest one yet. I'm doubting it will be, because I don't think the other two were the longest of the series either. I might be wrong about that, but I don't think they were. So let's see what they're going to do. All right, Ismael Montoya writes, John, over under 70% that the villain reveal is Kang. I'm going to go over 70. I'm saying right now it's 80%. So let's see if that works out or not. James Hoffman writes, favorite moment of the episode for me, classic Loki conjuring Asgard and his heroic sacrifice shouting glorious purpose. Dude, not only, here's what really makes that scene. Yes, the creating the illusion of an entire world of Asgard. Impressive. And him yelling glorious purpose. Awesome. But to me, it's about the performance of Richard E. Grant, because after he yells, glorious purpose, that maniacal laugh he does. Like, right? It's like, it's the performance that sells it. Like, if I was reading it on paper, classic Loki then conjures an illusion of the entire city of Asgard. As Alioth descends upon him, he stares it down defiantly, yelling, glorious purpose. Yeah, that would read nice. But it was Richard E. Grant's performance that absolutely brought that moment home and made it so awesome. So yeah, that was a great, great moment. All right, next up, we've got Matt Tween. Oh, wait a second. There was an 8 for Unjustified Gaming. We only did his other 7. Again, guys, please make sure you keep them all together next time. Also, Classic Loki was the king of this episode. The moment he stepped on screen, he demanded all the attention. His Asgard revival was so cinematic and beautiful. He reached his glorious purpose. And again, I just addressed that too. Absolutely, 100%. I can't agree with you more about that. It really was the highlight of that. Well, you know what? Let me backtrack on that. I personally still think the highlight probably of the episode is that character, because I'm all about character. So that character moment when Loki says, "I've betrayed everybody who's loved me." Because in that statement, he's not just acknowledging his behavior, but he's acknowledging that he doesn't have the excuse that everybody overlooks and ignores me. He acknowledges, my brother loved me. My father loved me. And you've never had that kind of acknowledgement from Loki before. Even in the further movies, there's never been an acknowledgement that you weren't overlooked, Loki. You weren't cast aside. You were loved. Obviously, Frigga loved him. And he now comes to the realization, my brother loved me. And my father, Odin, loved me. They loved me, and I betrayed them. And to me, that's still the highlight, but that moment with Richard E. Grant was fantastic. All right, Madaween writes, 1 of 2. So many Easter eggs in this one. There absolutely was. I had to pause and rewind several times to catch them all, and you probably still didn't even catch them all. Neither did I. Love seeing Throg. Loki learned that he has potential to be more powerful than he thought he could be. That was pretty cool, too. Yeah, that one was great. I really like that one a lot. And when he says, I think we're more powerful than we realize. Like when he saw what classic Loki was able to do, he's like, huh. I'm stronger than I thought. And it's going to be interesting to see how that comes into play once we get into the finale. So that's a really good observation, Madaween. We'll get to 2 a second, but Taki75 is in there too. It's like, Grant went out like a boss. Glorious. Again, I'm hoping, Taki, that he didn't go out at all. Anyway, Madaween, 2 of 2. By listening/watching Grant's Loki opens many possibilities for him in future films or season 2. Again, what I am hoping is that when he told the story about how he evaded Thanos, about creating a duplicate of himself so convincing it even fooled Thanos, I'm hoping that was not just a cool story. I'm hoping that was foreshadowing. Foreshadowing what would come later in the episode, and I'm hoping that the thing that got eaten by Elliot there was actually an illusion, even though we saw the helmet rolling around on the ground afterwards. But still, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed for that, dude. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed. All right, next up, Mark Blaza writes, this episode looked grand and Easter eggy. However, I felt empty afterwards. Since we did not get concrete answers, I consider myself disappointed. And Mark, I think you just summed it up perfectly. I am with you on that boat. There are definite highlights, moments I quite enjoyed. The Easter eggs were great, but at the end of the day, dissatisfied. The fact that they still left all this just open-ended, and now we've got to get it all done in the final episode, it's kind of unsatisfying. And you know what? I've been saying this whole time, people are asking me, how do you rank Loki compared to the other MCU shows so far? I said, you can't do that until you get the full show done. Because we've seen all of WandaVision. And we've seen all of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So we can properly, evaluate those. We have not seen all of Loki. But I will say this. I think right now, no matter how good the finale is, and I'm anticipating a fantastic finale, I kind of feel right now that no matter how good that finale is, I think Loki is going to end up being my third favorite of the 3 shows. I'm still enjoying it. I'm enjoying it. But I think it's going to end up behind WandaVision because it's only 6 episodes and already 2 of them to me were quite disappointing. One was seriously disappointing. That was episode 3. And now I kind of left feeling dissatisfied after episode 5 as well. So it's almost like I anticipate episode 6, the finale is going to be great. And overall, at the end of the day, I'm going to say I really like the Loki show, but I think almost no matter how good that finale is, I don't think it's going to be able to catch Falcon the Winter Soldier or WandaVision because I think episodes 3 and 5 were so weak. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. You never know for sure. All right, next up. David Smith writes, was this the best episode of Loki? No. Episode 4 is still the best episode in my opinion. I think I agree with you on that one, Dave. But this is a really good episode. Yes, especially the ending. I disagree. I'm glad you feel that way, David. I'm glad you do, and I'm glad you liked it on that level. Again, for me, there were moments, there were highlights, a lot of smiles on my faces, but that ending should have been the middle part of the episode. This episode should have introduced us to the person behind the counter, I keep wanting to say behind the counter, behind the curtain. We should have gotten some explanations to lay the groundwork for the finale. We should have understood, why is it Kang or whoever else it is? Why did Kang do this? What is the purpose of the timekeepers, the fake timekeepers? What's going on? Understand the motivation, and all that should have set the stage for the finale. Now we've got to go through all of that just in one episode, and I think that was a mistake. So when that episode ended, I just felt like, again, the best word I know how to describe it, David, is dissatisfied. But listen, just because I felt that way doesn't mean you needed to feel that way. And if you really enjoyed this episode, that's awesome. I wish I enjoyed it as much as you did. But I am looking forward to a fantastic finale. All right, next up, Darth Grant writes, episode was a 6.5 out of 10 overall for me, but had some of the best moments in the series for me, though. I hope it finishes strong, to be honest. I wouldn't say for me it had any of the best moments of the series, but it definitely had highlights. I would give it a 5 out of 10 if I gave numerical scores. Again, that moment with Loki and Sylvie, great moment. I wouldn't say it's one of the best of the series. The Glorious Purpose with Richard E. Grant, great moment. I wouldn't call it the best in the series. But those are two very, very strong moments. And again, the Easter eggs were great. The Thanos copter especially really got me excited, so I like that one a lot. Thanks a lot for sending that in, Darth. All right, Taki75 writes, Loki's disillusionment when he saw the other variants turning on each other was a great character moment. That was probably the one redeeming moment of that entire mess of a sequence, in my opinion. Hiddleston really sells his possible turn. He does. But again, I wish, after seeing the promo images of President Loki and all that kind of stuff, I really was looking forward to that being a special scene or series of scenes. I was really looking forward to a really cool sequence. And to me, it just quickly devolved into yuck, yuck, and a cheesy Adam West Batman fight scene that just felt more eye-rolling than anything else. And it really didn't serve any purpose, and it didn't really go anywhere. So I was kind of disappointed with that anyway. All right, next up. Mark Blaza writes, also, I have this ominous Matrix architect vibe coming at the finale, which makes me feel a little bit worried. Still excited, though. Well, listen, I think the whole TVA situation has kind of set us up for a Matrix architect kind of situation, right? Somebody is the mastermind behind the TVA, whether it was the timekeepers or somebody behind the timekeepers. So that was always going to be a part of it. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. That can be a very, very good thing and a very, very cool thing. So I just wish they'd showed us who it was, Mark, as we were leading into it. But yeah, whatever. That's just me. Okay, next up, we got Unjustified Gaming, who writes, one of two. Overall, feeling towards episode. Love the feeling over grandness and the Easter egg / continuity building. Didn't love the advancement of the plot. And again, we got to go hunting for his part 2 of 2. Oh, no, it's 2 of 3. Overall feeling of. But I feel as it left a lot to be desired in this final episode. I feel like this episode was made with the intent of people doing their own individual research of different places, characters, and events that pop up in this episode, which paints a much more clear picture of who the power players are at play here. I mean, the Sphinx, Kang Tower, Alioth, the Limbo Dimension, the Hourglass outside of the castle, all have their links, some pivotal to Kang. That's why I feel it's going to be Loki at the end. Kang built this world. My previous theory, Loki guards it. Okay, I disagree. See, here's the thing. And this goes back to like Agatha as well. There were some people who felt that, the Agatha thing was so obvious. But the thing is, you got to understand, 95% of the people who are watching WandaVision has never read any of the comics and have never even heard of Agatha, so it wasn't obvious to them. All these things about the signs that point to Kang, those of us who know something of the comics, we know that this is pointing to Kang, but 90% of the people who are watching Loki have never heard of Kang the Conqueror. They've never even heard of him. So these are just like cute little things, like treats for us who do know the material. But for a lot of people, they're going to meet Kang in the finale, if it is Kang. if it is Kang, and I'm not 100% sure of that, but I feel like it is. But they're going to get to that finale and meet this brand new character to them, and it's going to be a surprise, and this new character, right? And that's going to be new for us. It may not be new for them, but that's okay. So yeah, I think it's really great. Listen, not everything you put in these shows need to be easy for everybody to understand. You can put in the cute little things that only those of us with some insider knowledge and some inside baseball knowledge of the comics would get it, as long as it's not required for people to know it. And you don't. They can introduce Kang now in the finale, and it's perfectly good for the people who've never heard of him before. So I think it's a good thing that they're doing, and it's going to be neat to see how it kind of resolves. Okay, next up, we got David Smith, who writes, Episode 5 is an 8 out of 10. I disagree, but I'm glad you feel so. Best moment was classical Loki summoning Asgard to distract Alioth so Sylvie and Loki can enchant it. Cannot wait for the finale. Listen, the whole thing, I still think the best moment is that whole I've betrayed everybody who loves me moment, and I've already explained why. I thought the Richard E. Grant moment, glorious pup, that was a great highlight. It absolutely was. And once again, David, that's why I'm crossing my fingers that the one we saw die was actually an illusion, and I'm hoping we get to see more of him moving forward. All right, Rhett Proctor writes, an awesome episode. Classic Loki stole the show. Great to see Miss Minutes again. Tara Strong is my favorite voice actor next to Kevin Conroy. And again, yeah, it was great to see Miss Minutes again. I didn't think we would because I was told that we wouldn't, even though I knew he wasn't the most reliable source. Again, sorry to the person who's watching this. But yeah, that was really great to see Miss Minutes back again. So I do like the character. I still don't agree with all these people who think Ms. Minutes is ultimately going to be the one. There's a lot of people who legitimately think Ms. Minutes is going to be the one behind everything. And I don't agree with that at all. I don't think it's going to happen. But yeah, the Richard E. Grant Loki was absolutely a major highlight, Rhett. Completely agree. All right, John Salvi writes, would love to see a one-off show of Alligator Loki. I'm not going to lie. I wouldn't. I have no interest in that. It was cute for a minute, but I quickly got over it. So I think they took him out of the show at just the right time. That's just my opinion, John. All right. Matt Tween writes, what if we're being played again by Feige a la WandaVision and Kang is just another misdirect? The Kang stuff is just yummy geek candy, while the main storyline is something more direct. But I disagree, Matt Tween, because here's the thing. You're trying to compare the Kang situation to the Quicksilver, and that's not the comparison. The comparison is Kang to Agatha. And all the signs did point to Agatha, to the point that I made the mistake during WandaVision of thinking they're making it too obvious that it's Agatha, so it's clearly not going to be Agatha Harkness. When what I should have realized was that 95% of the people watching the show have never heard of Agatha Harkness. So while to me, it's too obvious that it's Agatha, for it to actually be Agatha, to 95% of the people watching, they've never even heard of Agatha. It's not too obvious to them. So yeah, trying to compare Kang to Quicksilver is the wrong comparison. The real comparison is, who was the big bad in WandaVision? It was Agatha. Who's the big bag in this? It's probably going to be Kang. So yeah, I don't think it's a misdirect. And remember, for us, it might, those of us who know the inside stuff, we're seeing all the things, the clear connections to Kang, but 9 out of 10 people watching the show have never even heard of Kang the Conqueror. So that's one of the reasons, Matt Tween, why I really do think it's going to end up being Kang the Conqueror. Not 100% sure, but pretty sure. We'll see. All right. John Salvi writes, I have a feeling Gator Loki is the new Baby Yoda. No, I don't think so. I think a lot of people thought it was pretty cute. I thought it was pretty cute, but it's not what Baby Yoda was. Like when Baby Yoda came on screen in that first episode of Mandalorian, he took over the internet. That's not Gator Loki. All right. Ricky Bobby writes, I never thought I'd see the Thanos copter. Neither did I, man, ever. I never thought I'd see the Thanos copter until this episode, and I was very pleased. Plus, Frog Thor got me happy too. I really love this episode. Yeah, listen, Easter eggs don't make an episode good, but they can be positive points in it. And so, while I love the Easter eggs, they didn't make the episode a good episode, because you can drop Easter eggs in any crap. But they were still smile-inducing. Like that Thanos copter. I mean, none of us ever thought that we would see a physical Thanos copter even if it's not real and it's just in the void, I get it. But still, none of us ever thought in the MCU we would ever see a physical manifestation of the Thanos copter. Never in a million years. Never in a million years. And yet there it was. And I gotta agree with you on that, Ricky. That was pretty cool. It was pretty smile-inducing. All right, next up. Ricky Bobby also writes again. Loki Gator stole the whole episode. I disagree. I thought it was kind of a throwaway thing. Anyway, and President Loki and Richard E. Grant Loki were awesome too. Glorious purpose. Again, I'm glad you liked President Loki. I was tremendously let down by President Loki. I'd been looking forward to that President Loki long before the show ever started. They was in all the promo images, and it ended up just being a total goofy waste of time. But anyway, listen, you appreciated it. Love it. You really, really liked Alligator Loki. I liked Alligator Loki, but it wasn't anything terribly special. But yes, Richard E. Grant with that big final line of glorious purpose. My God, that was fantastic. All right, John Salvi writes, damn classic Loki conjured in Asgard. I know, that was huge. And I love the fact that they followed that up, because I think Loki then said what a lot of us were thinking. Loki's that powerful? And so, I mean, then again, a lot of us were thinking that same thing when he caught the entire building that was falling down on them in episode 3. But yeah, when Loki said, I think we're more powerful than we think, that was a pretty cool line. All right, John Salvi also writes, that golden flaming sword of Loki was awesome. It was pretty cool. I would have liked to have seen him do more with it. I mean, because how great is a weapon that you don't actually really get to see used, but it did look pretty damn cool. All right. Brian Croson writes, liking, not loving this episode. Like that chemistry between Loki and Sylvie is getting better. Over or under 10%. Mobius might be a Loki. I'm getting a feeling about it. Now, I'm going to go under 10%. Now, I agreed with some people earlier in the show, like in the earlier episodes, that thought, is it possible that Mobius is like, because that would kind of explain a little bit Mobius's fascination with the Lokis. Because remember, he's kind of obsessed with the Lokis. He studies the Lokis. He knows everything about the Lokis. But I think as the show has progressed, it's become pretty clear he's not a Loki. I think that's been clear. And the whole jet ski thing, yeah, that's not an Asgardian thing. I mean, he's an Earth guy. He's an Earth guy. So I'm not going to say it's impossible, but if you're setting the over-under number at 10%, I'm going to go ahead and take the under 10% on that one, Brian. All right, next up, Ricky Bobby writes, I might have missed what happened, but what happened to the Black Loki? I think he was killed in the big fight. Here's the thing. This is the worst part about it. I didn't care. Like that whole thing where they, oh, you betrayed me. We had a deal. No, we had a deal. Blah, blah, blah. Pow, boom, boom. It was such a dumb, goofy scene that had no purpose, let alone a glorious purpose, and just didn't work at all. So here's the thing. I'm not 100% sure, Ricky, about what happened to him. But what's worse is I don't care what happened to him because the scene was so dumb and goofy. So I didn't care what happened to President Loki. I didn't care what happened to anybody in that because it was just so lame, which is too bad because it could have been something pretty cool. That's just my take. All right, next up, Ricky Bobby writes, I think Richard E. Grant's Loki gave Tom Hiddleston's Loki how to escape his death in Infinity War when he was talking about how he faked his death. Yes, but remember now, for this Loki, the timeline has changed for this Loki. This Loki will never be in that situation. This Loki has already seen how that all played out. So this Loki is never going to find himself in that exact situation in the first place. Like, because if he just jumped back into the time stream and into the timeline, he can just tell Thor, oh, by the way, as they're leaving Asgard, don't take this trajectory, take that trajectory. Because if we go in this trajectory, we're going to be intercepted by Thanos' ship. So we should beat it this way, go at top speed, and go into hiding pretty fast. Because Thanos, I mean, again, so I don't think that's actually going to happen. But I mean, who knows what they're going to do with all this time stuff, Ricky. All right, next up, we've got Nora Helmer, 023, who writes, I'll leave theorizing to others and just say how great I find Mobius to be. I agree. Okay, I'll get back to that in a second. That folksy dope is my MVP of this show, and their hug at the end really underscored how Mobius was the catalyst for our Loki's change and growth. You know what? I think you're right. I was just talking about how Sylvie is a major plot device for the evolution and changing of Loki, but really, I like the way you phrased that. Mobius was the catalyst of that before Sylvie even really became a part of it. It was that friendship that he extended him. And I still believe that the banter and the dialogue and the chemistry between Loki and Mobius is ultimately the main strength of this show. I mean, it's all about the character growth of Loki and the character evolution of Loki, but man, that element of the show is just so valuable and so important, and really has been the top-notch thing about this show overall, Nora. It really is. And I think I said this in one of the earlier episodes, but I'll say it again. They literally could just have an episode, an entire 51-minute episode of Loki and Mobius sitting in a cafeteria across from each other on a table, just talking for 51 minutes. And I would eat that episode up. I would eat it up. Because it's playing into what I think are the main strengths of this show. And I don't think, Nora, that we can highlight that enough. I really don't. I think it's that important. And I agree with you 1,000%. And by the way, Nora tipped in like $20 in the super chat doing that. Thank you so much for supporting our channel on that level, Nora, at the same time. Appreciate that very much. All right. Lizzie J writes, while the episode wasn't bad, I felt a bit let down. I agree. I don't think it was bad, but I was a bit disappointed with it. So I agree with you. Love the Loki gang. I didn't like the Loki gang. And Mobius. Loved Mobius. But Renslayer can't be trusted. And that ending. We have so much to wrap up in only 50 minutes. Getting a bit worried. I am too. Again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier, Lizzie. They should have had the reveal of the big bad in this episode. We should have been given some of the answers so we could have the last episode to just bring all the conflict as a result of the characters and their motivations, then just brought to conclusion. Now we got to do all that in one episode. Now, there is nothing saying, I don't think, officially, how long the final episode is going to be. It will probably be 50 minutes or less, but who knows? Maybe we'll load up the final episode of Loki and it's going to be 125 minutes. I don't believe that it will at all, but wouldn't it be great if it was? Wouldn't it be great if we loaded up and says 89 minutes? Awesome. But it's probably going to be like 51 minutes, 52 minutes, and they've got a lot to accomplish, Lizzie. They got an awful lot to accomplish. All right, next up, Suthius writes, from the promos, we have not seen King Loki yet. Is he in the castle beyond the void? Perhaps it is a misdirect for the true mastermind, perhaps. I don't know what you're talking about, Suthius. We absolutely saw him, and it was totally a waste. So talking about from the promos, I mean, unless I'm missing something, which is completely possible, I could be missing something. Unless I'm missing something, we saw everything. And so, and that one of the reasons why I was pretty disappointed with it. All right, next up, Darth Grant writes, prediction 1, Sylvie dies in the next episode. That's a very real possibility. 2, Kang revealed to be the mastermind, but only appears in end credits. That would be a massive FU to the audience if they did that. So I don't think so. Number 3, Loki unleashes Alioth in the TVA headquarters for revenge. I don't know that he would. Okay, let's start with number 1. Sylvie dies in the next episode. I give that a 40% chance. I think there's a very real possibility. 2, Kang revealed to be the mastermind, but only appears in the end credits. Again, I think that would be a massive FU to the audience. We have been waiting this whole show to just say, to end the show and just go, oh, by the way, everybody, I'm Kang the Conqueror. I'm the guy who's behind everything. Bye. That would be a total FU to the audience. So I really hope they have enough common sense not to do that. Number 3, Loki unleashes Alioth on the TVA. I don't believe that because we now know that everybody in the TVA is a victim. Everybody at the TVA, all the Minutemen, all the agents of the TVA, they are all victims. They're all variants who were stolen from their lives and brainwashed and dropped in there. For Loki now to just unleash Alioth, by the way, I don't think he has any power to do that, but if it could, even if he could, for Loki to then unleash Alioth on the TVA and murder all of those people who are themselves victims would undo so much of the character development of Loki. That would be a pretty evil thing to do. So I'm gonna guess against it, Darth. I'm gonna guess against it. All right, next up. Lizzie J writes, I'm officially off the Kang train and convinced it was Loki all along, not happy about it, but oh well. See, that's interesting, Lizzie, because I was on the fence and this episode completely convinced me, not completely, but 80% convinced me that it is Kang. I think all the signs are pointing to Kang. I don't think it's going to be a Loki variant. There's still a 10% chance it's a Loki variant, so who knows, we'll see. But it is funny how we can watch the same episode. This is the great thing about storytelling and the art, is that we just watched the same episode and your reaction was, well, I'm totally convinced it's not Kang now. Whereas I'm totally convinced it is Kang now. It's kind of cool the way that happens, but we will find out. We should have found out in episode 5, but we will find out in episode 6. Okay, next up, we've got Marie Seifring, who writes, loved Richard E. Grant's performance. Completely agree. He made that thing. I saw another commenter point out that it was the ride the Valkyries playing as he created the Asgard illusion. I don't remember that. Was it? If it was, that's a totally appropriate piece of music for them to be playing during that scene. And again, it looked awesome. It was fantastic. But even though it was a very well-written moment, it was Richard E. Grant's performance of that really brought it home for me. Thanks for that, Marie. Next up, Andrew Huffman writes, funny enough, I don't think it's Kang anymore. See, you and Lizzie both. After so many clues and hints, I think it's a misdirect. Getting Mandarin vibes from this. Hope I'm wrong. But again, Andrew, go back to WandaVision. Because you're saying exactly what I was saying during WandaVision. I was saying they're making it way too obvious it's Agatha, so it's not going to be Agatha. But it was Agatha. Because what I failed to realize, and what I think you're failing to realize now, is that 90% plus of these people who are watching the show have never heard of Kang. They never heard of Agatha, and they never heard of Kang. So if it's a big giant misdirect, it's not misdirecting the audience. It's just misdirecting the 5 to 10% of us who know this stuff about Kang the Conqueror and who know who Kang the Conqueror is. And why would they bother doing that? Right? So to me, it's very much a situation. Now, again, I'm not saying it's 100%. But I do think it's a big, big solid 80. Because again, you are sounding just like I did back in WandaVision when I was saying, it's too obvious it's Agatha. Way too obvious. Clearly that's a misdirect. It's not going to be Agatha. But if I had realized and thought about, 95% of the audience has never even heard of Agatha Harkness. So, and I think that's the situation here. So I do think it's going to be Kang, but we'll find out. We're less than a week away and we will find out, Andrew. All right. Thanks for writing that in, man. Next up, Rob Vasquez writes, man, I just hope the big bad is not a Loki variant, but maybe I'll love it. Who knows? Also, I'll very surprised if it is indeed Kang. I'm not gonna be surprised at all anymore. Actually, I wouldn't have been surprised the whole time. I wasn't actually predicting Kang earlier on, but I wasn't going to be surprised with Kang. And by the way, if it does turn out to be a Loki variant, it could still be done in a really cool way. It actually could end up being better than Kang, but I am still believing right now it's going to be Kang. All right, next up, James Argento writes, never thought we'd see Thanos Copter in live action. You and me both, James. Is there anything from comics you would be shocked to see in the next few years? Mine is Batmite. Well, I mean, here's the thing. If you're going to do something in a really silly, doesn't have actually any implications on anything sort of way, like the Thanos Copter popping up in a void, then really there's nothing they could do that would shock me. Really, there's nothing. Now, if we're talking about, actually in a movie, in a Doctor Strange 2, such and such appeared. But if we're talking about the same way the Thanos Copter showed up, where it's in a way and done in such a narrative style that it really doesn't have any implications on the MCU and it's not really even real, then nothing would surprise me. Honestly, I think at this point, the only thing that could possibly surprise me, James, is if a DC character shows up. If Batman literally shows up at the Void Castle in episode 6, then I can officially say that would shock me. All right, next up, Marie Seifring writes, I've been I've seen fans discuss how frequently characters lose limbs in Marvel movies, i.e. Bucky or Thor in Thor: The Dark World. I guess Gator Loki swallowing President Loki's hand is the show's version. But yeah, but let's also remember, it's not like the MCU is the only one that does that, right? Like Star Wars does that too. How many people have lost hands, right? Luke lost a hand. Vader lost a hand. The dude in the bar that Obi-Wan cut his arm off, that dude lost a hand. I mean, yeah, then Anakin, Anakin lost a hand in one of the prequels. I mean, so they've done it too. So yeah, maybe Marvel and Disney, a little bit of that going on. So I don't know if that was a continuation of that tradition, but maybe it was. Maybe it was. All right, next up. Marie Seifring also writes, over under 30%, either our Loki or Sylvie doesn't survive the last episode. Let's put it this way. Loki dying is not really something I've considered. I'm just assuming Tom Hiddleston's Loki will make it out of it. But he's died and come back so many times, it almost doesn't matter if he dies, right? It's irrelevant if he dies because he'll just come back. I mean, he sort of died at the end of the first Thor movie. Then he sort of died in Thor: The Dark World. And then he died in Infinity War. And then he died in episode 4 when we saw him get pruned, right? And like, instead of making us wait a month or a year or a day, they literally told us in 5 minutes later he's not really dead. But they have fake deathed him so many times, it wouldn't matter. So I don't think it's going to be Loki, but I think there's a very real chance Sylvie could die in this. So while I wouldn't say over 50%, I will take over 30. I'll take over 30 on that, Marie. We'll find out. We'll find out in a few days, but I'm going to take over 30 on that. All right, next up. Crashing Coyote writes, he who remains is behind this. Comics and MCU are different, but it would tie up all the loose ends. In comics, he the TVA director, and he created the Keepers. Again, I disagree. I think that would be a little bit too much out of left field for Marvel to do here. So I really do think they're going to go Kang. But listen, here's the thing, Crashing Coyote. You're not alone in that. There have been several people online and in our own chats who have been suggesting it might be He Who Remains. It's a possibility. Again, I still think it's going to be Kang. Because we know Kang is going to be a part of the MCU moving forward because he's going to be in Ant-Man 3. That's already been confirmed. So it just seems to make more sense it's going to be him. Why would they bring up... Here's the thing. Why would they save the big villain reveal until the very last episode of Loki if it was going to be a character we have never heard of and doesn't have a future in the MCU? At least with Kang, we know this character has a future in the MCU. Again, it could be totally wrong, though. Could be wrong, but we'll find out. All right, thanks for sharing that, Crashing. Remember, you're not alone in that theory. All right. Kreshka also writes, Anne resides at the Citadel at the end of time. Loki / Sylvie are at the end of time. And the last shot we see is the Citadel later. It's revealed there is a fourth timekeeper, but banished him to ancient Egypt, Kang. So I think the MCU twist is that he's another Loki, but his defeat will set up free Kang for Ant-Man 3. Again, I think that's getting a little bit too convoluted. I mean, you've thought that out and you're connecting all the dots, and that's awesome. I personally feel it's a little bit too convoluted. Whenever a lot of theories pop up for either WandaVision or Falcon Winter Soldier that end up getting a little bit too convoluted, it never ends up being those things. So I don't think they're going to do that. I think it's going to be listen, we've only got one episode left. That's it. Not counting credits, which run about 6 or 7 minutes, we've probably got about 40, 41, 42 minutes of Loki left, where they've got to give us first we got to get Loki and Sylvie to actually get to the villain, discover who it is, find out what their motivations were, that whole thing, and then come to resolution all in about 40 something minutes. I just don't see them going that out of left field. Now, I could be wrong, and maybe we'll watch it next week and I'll be very pleasantly surprised. But as of right now, I think all signs point to it being Kang. We're going to meet Kang, understand his motivations, learn about him. How did he do the TVA? What was the point of the TVA? And then have them figure out whatever their plan is, and they're going to stop him. But of course, he'll still be around because then he's going to pop back up in Ant-Man 3. So that's my guess, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, next up. Rob Vasquez writes, greetings. I love the spoiler discussion. Thanks, man. I love doing them. If you ever go over to Mexico, order your breakfast like this. Web it toes, come shore is so, and free haul it toes. I don't know what any of that means. I'm going to guess it's probably has something to do with ketchup on eggs. I don't know. I'm just guessing, but we'll see. All right. Daniel Luna writes, I enjoyed this episode, but it wasn't my favorite. Did you see poor Throg trying to escape the jar? # free Throg. Oh yeah, I saw that. Again, I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I actually kind of thought at first I really did think it was Beta Ray Bill. I thought it was a little tiny Beta Ray Bill trying to get out of a jar. But you guys are, I mean, obviously it was Frog Thor, so that there was that, but I actually thought it was Beta. And I was actually even a little bit disappointed that it wasn't, as it turns out. All right, next up, we got Casey McNatt, who writes, 1 of 5. John, I just have a few points I have to make about this episode. In my opinion, I love the episode. I'm glad you did. I wish I did too. I feel like people just want everything shown to them all at once. 1, you had a bunch of Lokis drinking wine, beer, and what was Kid Loki drinking? Ecto Cooler, the High C. Yeah, that was great. God, how I miss those. All the Avengers needed in the battle against Thanos was an alligator Loki / Croaky, because he would have been able to bite Thanos' hand off. I'm not even sure he would have been able to get his mouth around Thanos' hand, to be honest with you. But nobody was willing to help poor Throg. Remember, he was buried in the ground there, right? Remember, we saw that the camera panned down. So I don't even know if anybody knows he's there. Nobody's willing to help poor Throg. Thor, who was just trying to reach his hammer. And lastly, I think the person behind this isn't Loki, isn't Kang, isn't Doctor Doom. It's a person nobody probably ever heard of before or expects. And lastly, I think the person behind, and Coyote is right. I think it is he who remains. I mean, don't think Majors was even cast till after Loki was filmed. The TVA will have to fall in order for him to rise. Well, I mean, we kind of addressed that before. About somebody brought up, well, Majors wasn't cast until after they had done the production of Loki. That's not true. Majors' announcement of his casting wasn't made until after they shot Loki. See, everybody forgets that by the time they make these announcements, it's probably been signed, sealed, and delivered for 6 months to a year. Remember, it's been confirmed that when they announced Ben Affleck was going to be Batman, it was actually already a done deal like 7 months earlier. Right? It's not like they signed the deal and instantly went to press with the news. So again, I'm not saying for sure it's going to be Kang, but it does not hurt the chances of it being Kang because of when they announced Jonathan Majors being cast in the role. Because for all we know, he was cast in that role a year earlier or more. And they just never, publicized it or let people know about it. So I'm not saying that means it will be Kang. It's just not a reason to believe it won't be. Because yes, they didn't announce his signing until X date. But that means he was at the very minimum 2 or 3 months before that, maybe even up to a year before that. It was pretty much a done deal. Don't know for sure, but we'll have to see as far as that goes. All right. Next up, we've got Tim Platt, who writes, the only problem I have with this episode is that this is what episode 3 should have been like. It was fun and I liked it, but still kind of fillerish. Yeah, overall, again, it is one of those episodes. When I say I'm a bit disappointed with the episode, I know some people will instantly interpret that as me saying that I hated it. I didn't hate it. It definitely had upside. The glorious purpose moment, I've betrayed everybody that I've loved, all the Easter eggs. There was definite highlights through this. And this is a good example, I think you're right, of what they could have done with episode 3. You wanted episode 3 to show the growing bond between Loki and Sylvie. Great. Well, you should have done that while doing 5 or 6 other things at the same time. And they didn't. And it ended up being a snore fest of an episode, at least in my estimation. So I agree. Not a terrible episode. I don't think episode 5 was bad. I just was a little bit disappointed because I thought they could have done, just a little bit more. All right, next up. Jesus Lover writes, This was a good episode. The moment where we see Loki and Mobius hug before he went back to the TVA, emotional. Wonder if we see Mobius on that jet ski. I cannot believe there's any way that they do not show us Mobius on the jet ski. Whether it's a post-credit scene or just at the very end, they had to have known in writing these episodes that the audience is going to want to see Mobius on that jet ski. The very fact that he brought it up again when he confronted Ravonna, because if he didn't bring it up again, if he didn't bring up the jet ski thing when talking to Ravonna, maybe we could have let that go. But they made such a big deal out of it with the magazine and talking about it's the greatest thing ever, and then he brings it up again later. They had to have known that the audience would have been dying to see it, and I just can't believe we won't see it. I gotta believe we're going to see it, but we'll find out. All right, next up. Tim Platt writes, I think my favorite part of the episode was all of the Lokis going full Loki and betraying another classic. I'm glad you like that part, Tim. I thought that entire sequence was a total waste. It was goofy. It didn't accomplish anything. It just made Lokis seem like morons, like all Lokis are morons. That's what it kind of came across to me. And again, had that Adam West Batman poom pow sort of thing. I did not like it at all. I'm glad you did, though. And I'm sure you're probably not the only one. So I wish I was able to have that enthusiasm too. All right, next up. Charlton Hovis writes, in a sense, didn't Loki enchant Valkyrie in Ragnarok? He looked into her mind to see the Hela fight scene. He also used telekinesis in Dark World. Just because, here's the thing though, just because he looked into her mind doesn't necessarily mean he enchanted her. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they'll define it as something that they did. That's a really good callback, by the way, Charlton. Well done. But I don't think that necessarily equaled enchantment. He wasn't able then to control her and get her to do things and whatever. He was able to look in and see something. So, but I do think that's different. I think that's different. And yeah, I guess we did see a little, I don't remember the exact moment, but I guess he did use a little bit of telekinesis in that. But still, telekinesis on that level, that he was able in episode 3 to stop that entire falling building, that's powerful. I mean, that Thanos weighs 1,000 times less than that building does. Loki should have been able to just pick up Thanos and throw him across the room. I mean, the MCU has been very inconsistent with what Loki can and cannot do, but that's a really good stuff that you brought up there, Charlton. Thanks for that. Jesus Lover writes, will B-15 be pruned? It happened to C-20 in episode 4. I don't think so. We're running out of time. I think we have now left the void. I don't think we're going back into the void at this point. I think we'll see B-15 in the final episode, but I don't expect that we're going to see her get pruned and then she's in the void. Now they got to get her out of the void. Just not enough time for them to do all that. All right, Tim Platt writes, this episode has me fully convinced that the big bad is another Loki. Again, it's weird because it's got me convinced that it's Kang now. I don't think that they just throw Kang in now. Plus, Mobius has been pitching his superior Loki concept from the beginning. Again, listen, I'm not saying I think it's impossible that it's a Loki variant. I am still leaving 10% that it's another Loki variant. I'm 80% because I was 33% Kang, 33% Loki variant, 33% somebody else entirely. I am now 80% Kang, 10% Loki, 10% another, or 10% somebody else entirely. So I still believe there's like a 10% chance. I won't fall out of my chair in shock if it turns out to be a Loki variant, but it just feels like all signs point to Kang. But we'll find out. I love being surprised, and maybe it'll surprise me. All right, next up, we go to that guy who writes, hey, John. Hope you're having a great day. I am having a great day, thank you. I found it very interesting how the TVA left classic Loki alone until he decided he wanted to see if anyone missed him. I think his backstory, as well as the diversity of Lokis, reveals the lie of the sacred timeline, as there are many different timelines that deviate from each other. I don't know about that, and I'm not really clear on what it is you're saying here. I hope you're having a great day. I found it interesting how the TVA left classic Loki alone until he wanted to see. Oh, I see what you're saying. See if See if anyone missed him. I think his backstory, as well as the diversity of Loki's, reveals the lie of the sacred timeline, as there are many different timelines that deviate from each other. See, here's why I think that's interesting that you bring that up, that guy. Because I've been wondering, why wasn't Sylvie brought in by the TVA the moment she became female? That's a deviation right there. That in and of itself is a variance. Well, all the stuff that this Loki talked about is different from what our Loki went through. Shouldn't that, like the fact that this Loki had an encounter with Thanos and fooled him with a projection of him, isn't that a variance in the timeline? So I think you're right, and I'm glad you brought that up, that guy, because I think there are a lot of questions they still need to answer about this, because there does seem to be a lot of inconsistency with that. But I'm going to guess that we're going to get answers about that when we find out who's behind it all. At least I hope we do. All right, next up, we got Fanblaze71 who writes, and tips in like $20. Thank you, Fanblaze, for supporting our channel on that level. Oh my God, John, I absolutely loved this episode. I'm glad you did, man. Has me at the edge of my seat like at a movie theater. This totally felt like a big budget movie to me. Absolutely love the final fight and the blanket scene. Wow, just wow. The blanket scene was a nice touch. Again, somebody else brought it up earlier in the video today, but it was like that almost teenage-like awkwardness. Sylvie's never been in love. Loki has had many partners, but he's never genuinely cared for somebody like this. And so that banter and awkwardness and the blanket moment was really nice. And have we ever seen Loki do something legitimately sweet? That was a legitimately sweet moment when he readjusted the blanket to also cover her. We have literally never seen Loki do anything like that. In any of the movies over the years, never seen it done. And it was a genuinely nice moment. So again, I still find the whole relationship to be gross because they're two versions of the same person. So I think that's really kind of effed up. But hey, whatever. It was a pretty damn sweet moment though. All right, next up we go back to Fangblaze71 who writes, this has to be my favorite episode. I was enjoying this more than most of the movies, and I absolutely love the MCU movies. Best episode for me. I'm glad. See that, and again, this highlights the beautiful thing about the art, man. Like, I watched it and felt disappointed by it. You watched the exact same episode, but for you, it gave you a tremendously positive experience. That kind of subjectivity, some people don't understand it, but it is the most beautiful thing about the art, is that we can all watch the same thing and come away with completely different experiences. And that's the total beautiful thing about it. And I'm glad. I mean, again, I've said many times this episode that I was disappointed in the episode. I didn't like it all that much. They're great moments, but overall, kind of disappointed. But you loved it. And that's beautiful. That is an awesome, awesome thing about this sort of stuff. And I'm glad that you did, Fangblaze. All right, next up, we got the CTB channel writes. Hey, John, did Marvel used a fan theory? Loki posing as space debris has been going around since Infinity War came out on Blu-ray in 2018. Thoughts? I don't think so. I mean, don't forget that's just a variation of a theory that goes all the way back to The Empire Strikes Back, where the Millennium Falcon just disguised itself as space debris floating away, right? So I don't think so, but I'm using my words carefully here. I don't think so. Let's put it this way, CTB. I won't be shocked if at some point we get like, so far every one of these shows has had like a documentary episode afterwards about the making of Loki. I won't be shocked at all if we find out the writers say that it is, but right now I'm going to say I don't think so. But let's wait until that making of Loki special CTB and see if they say something about it, because maybe you're onto something there. All right, My Comic Planet writes, Easter egg. The abandoned Avengers Tower doesn't say Avengers on it. Instead, it shows Kang, which is reference to the company that is owned by Nathaniel Richards, aka Kang the Conqueror. Yep, I mentioned that on yesterday on the initial live stream that we tried that then eventually died. I mentioned that myself, but that's just one of them. Like again, the Void Palace, Alioth, the Kang written on Avengers Tower. I just think they're all adding up to point to Kang. Again, not 100% about that. Still possibly a Loki variant, still possibly something else entirely. But that was a very, very interesting thing because we were watching that. Me, Anna, and our buddy Ryan, we were watching the show. And instantly as it went past Avengers time, I'm like, wait a minute, that didn't say Avengers. And we stopped and rewound. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's just Kang. So yeah, it's a very, very important one too, I think, My Comic Planet. All right, next up. NR99 writes, John, I would die of laughter if the person inside the castle turns out to be the Loki variant, Alan Cumming of Son of the Mask. It is so funny to me how many people have been writing in about Alan Cumming and Son of the Mask. And of course, if you guys remember the classic Jim Carrey comedy, Jim Carrey, Cameron Diaz, The Mask. The Mask was supposedly made by the Norse god Loki. And then Alan Cumming plays Loki. And so a lot of people have been wondering if we're going to see Alan Cumming pop up as a Loki variant. I do not think they're going to go there. But NR99, I'm going to have to agree with you. If it does turn out to be that, I will also laugh my ass off. All right, next up. Ryan Lohner writes, I'll definitely be looking for chances to use the line, which I'm heartbroken to report I didn't even find all that strange. That was a great line. Now, I know it comes from the writers, but for whatever reason, throughout the history of the MCU and Loki being in it, Loki has had some of the most awesome lines, which I'm heartbroken to report I didn't even find all that strange. That is a great line. Like, go all the way back to I am Loki of Asgard and I'm burdened with glorious purpose. Like, he always has great lines. It's like, if it's all the same to you, I'll have that drink now. He's always got great lines. They always write great lines for him. All right, next up, we've got Levy R who writes, all the Easter eggs in this episode, love it. The shows from Marvel are so great. Kind of wish everything wasn't connected because I want a show just focused on Odin and how he became the All-Father. Well, I mean, here's the thing, Levi. Why couldn't they do that with it? I mean, understanding that it's all connected. Why couldn't they, if they wanted to, do a prequel of Odin to show Odin becoming the All-Father? I mean, they could still do that and it's connected and there's nothing stopping them. I mean, remember, they just dipped their toe in prequel stuff now with Black Widow. The Black Widow movie is in and of itself a prequel. So they could do that too. The problem is, of course, you'd have to get Anthony Hopkins, and I don't know that you can get Anthony Hopkins to do it anymore. I guess you can get a younger actor to play a younger Anthony Hopkins, I suppose. But part of the thing I love about Odin is the fact that it's played by Anthony Hopkins. But I know, I mean, hey, listen, it's not impossible, Levi. It's not impossible. Okay, next up. My Comic Planet writes, although Ravonna now knows the Timekeepers were lying about transforming the Void into a utopia, she still doesn't want to burn the TVA down. She is totally going to the dark side, which is why I believe this is her villain origin story and that we will see a lot more of her in the MCU. Okay, there's something I agree with and something I disagree with there. I agree we're going to see more of her in the future of the MCU. Totally believe that. Totally agree. Wouldn't be surprised if she's also in Ant-Man 3. But just because she's found these things out and is not at a point of wanting to burn the TVA down does not necessarily point to a villain origin. It could just be that she still believes in the mission of the TVA, even though the mission of the TVA is a lie. But she may not know that yet. If she still at her core believes that maintaining the sanctity of the sacred timeline prevents a multidimensional war that would end all existence, that could be what's driving her right now. And if that's what's driving her, I don't see her being a villain. But it could very well be something else altogether. And I don't know, maybe we will see her go. Like, she's been portrayed different ways in the comics, so it could go either way. I'm just not convinced of either yet. I'm right in the middle. I'm 50% she's going good, 50% she's going bad. So I'm still kind of on the fence about it. Like, I wouldn't be shocked at all if we find out in the final episode that Morbius gets through to her. I keep wanting to say Morbius. Mobius gets through to her, and she and he work together to end the TV. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but I also wouldn't be surprised if she has a fight to the death with Mobius. I don't know. We'll have to see as we get into the last episode. Okay, next up, we've got Fangblaze71 who writes, frickin' Thanos copter, John. Frickin' Thanos copter. This episode really felt like it had a movie budget to it. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. But anyway, effects were insane. Loki 2024. I mean, I will say this, though. The whole Asgardian, that part, that looked pretty damn good. Culminating with Richard E. Grant's great Glorious Purpose line. I did like that part an awful lot. All right, next up, we've got Alex Burgos, who writes, one of two. I love the way they used Alioth. His role was very similar in the comics, yeah, to a degree, yeah. And yes, for those keeping track, heavy connected to Kang's origins. At this point, I don't see how Kang is not involved in some way, unless they're doing a complete overhaul of the character's origins. Overall, great episode. And listen, again, that's where I've come to again. I really do believe this is going to end up being Kang. I know Jonathan Majors was recently talking and he kind of hinted that he's not involved. Maybe it's not. That's why I'm saying 80% instead of 100%, but I still kind of believe it is, Alex. So I completely agree with your assessment. All right, Spark the producer writes, yes, finally Throg is now canon in the MCU. Here's the thing though. I had this quick conversation with some people saying, well, the Thanos copter is now canon in the MCU. I don't think anything that's in the void is canon in the MCU. They're all plucked from Elseworld kind of stuff. So I don't know if something just randomly happens in an Elseworld. So I don't know that Throg is, but whatever. It was still great to see him regardless. Okay, next up. Joe D writes, hey, John, thanks for doing these. I love doing these. So thanks for being a part of it, Joe. I was really hoping for a Matt Damon as Loki cameo in this one. I am not going to be surprised if we get that still. Of course, people, you might be asking, wait, Matt Damon, remember in, was it Thor the Dark World? Yeah, Thor the Dark World. Where, was it Thor the Dark World or was it yeah, it was Thor the Dark World. Where, you know, Matt Damon was playing an actor version of Loki. Or was that Thor Ragnarok? Now I can't even remember which one happened which. I'm going to say it was Thor the Dark World. Anyway, yes. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm not saying I believe it's going to happen. I'm just saying I won't be completely shocked if that's what they do, Joe. All right. Peter Cunnington writes, I think at some point they're going to make the Young Avengers and Kid Loki is going to be in it. That's a popular theory right now. There are a lot of people thinking that that young Loki we saw isn't just a random character that's going to be in Loki. There are a bunch of people online that think that that now kid was our introduction to the Kid Loki variation we're going to get in Young Avengers. Now, I'm not convinced of that, but it very well could be, and this was his introduction to us, so I don't know. We'll see where that goes, Peter. You could be right about that. All right, Power is Power writes, would like to have a moment of silence for my expectations. Okay, thank you. Service will be held Wednesday, July the 14th at 4 p.m. Will be a celebration of the positives and highlights in its life. Bring your own booze. I mean, yeah, listen, that's one of the great things about these shows. Honestly, I would find these shows boring if they all met what my expectations were. I was expecting this, and this, and it did all that. Well, that gets a little bit boring. It's kind of fun when our expectations are deviated from and something happens that we weren't expecting and stuff like that. That's what keeps it fresh and interesting. Power is Power. That's what keeps it fresh and interesting. All right, next up. Hansel Santiago writes, have a feeling Sylvie will turn on Loki. It's possible. That would be a devastating blow to him. What do you think? You know, somebody else wrote in, I think it might have been during the pregame show, I can't remember, suggesting that Sylvie, you remember Sylvie says to him, how do I know you're not going to turn on me? She's still a Loki. Loki's turned on people. Our own Loki said, I've betrayed everybody that's loved me. You know, somebody else was bringing up a little bit earlier that, you know, Sylvie could die. Very well. Very well could happen. But I think there is that possibility, Hansel, that the Loki nature will just kick in Sylvie and she may actually end up betraying our Tom Hiddleston Loki. I wouldn't put money on that. I wouldn't. But it is one of those situations where I kind of agree it wouldn't be completely unexpected. It wouldn't be completely unexpected if it did happen. So let's keep her. So she'll either die or she could turn on him or she becomes a new regular character in the MCU. I just don't think it should be considered completely unexpected. All right. Spark the producer writes, this episode seed more for the fans with all the eggs. This episode seed more for the fans with all the eggs. Not quite sure what you're talking about there, Spark. Sorry about that, man. Emil Johansson writes, if it is Kang, then will he be portrayed as a god? I don't think so. I mean, really, when you look at Kang in the comics, he's not really. It's just that, with the technology that he has and stuff like that, being able to manipulate and travel through time. I mean, of course, listen, Kang has been handled many, many different ways in the comics. There's also been multitudes of them at the same time. So first of all, we don't even know if it is Kang. So it's really difficult to try to speculate about how he's going to be portrayed when we don't even know for sure if it is him. So we'll find out in a few days here. Rob Fitz writes, so classic Loki faked his death to Thanos, and that wasn't his Nexus event. I just said that earlier this episode myself. I just said that myself. Is that teasing Loki actually survived Endgame? I don't think so. I think it's an inconsistency in this story. Listen, I've said this before, I will say it again. Whenever you introduce any kind of time travel or time manipulation in any movie, TV show, or story, you're going to have logic problems. And you're going to have inconsistencies. Even the best of them, like Star Trek, The Voyage Home, Back to the Future, there are entire YouTube videos dedicated to breaking down the logic problems in those. Even they're great, but whenever you introduce time travel, there's always inconsistencies. And I think this is one of those inconsistencies. I do. And I think there have been several, as a matter of fact. I think there have been several. All right, next up. Power is Power writes, Fantastic Four confirmed. Everyone knows if you rearrange the words Alioth, it spells it spells Galactus. Listen, man, don't be surprised. I've already seen a lot of people speculating that, with Fantastic Four connections, that the person in that castle at the end, there are a lot of people out there who think that's going to be Doctor Doom. I clearly do not. But a lot of people think it's going to be Doctor Doom. Some people think there's going to be a Galactus connection. What are you going to do, Power is Power? All right, Elliot Cecil writes, did you see Throg or Frog Thor by Mjolnir? Yep. Again, initially I thought it was a little Beta Ray Bill, but it turns out it was Throg. All right, Casey McNatt writes, I just got to say Richard E. Grant stole the show. Completely agree. In this episode, he should get a raise for his laugh alone. The laugh was great. That whole, as he's saying glorious purpose and he sees Alioth coming, like just laughing in the face of Doom. That was awesome. Richard E. Grant is a special actor. No wonder he's one of Robert Meyer Burnett's favorites. All right, Tim Platt writes, well, no wonder I was leaning towards a Loki variant being the big bad. I didn't catch / understand 99% of the Easter egg / comic reference in this episode. This is why I tune in for these discussions. I mean, hey, listen, you're not alone. Like I was saying, the vast, 100%, that the vast majority of people who watch Thor don't know any of those Easter eggs. I mean, they probably saw Thor's hammer. If they watched the MCU movies, they probably saw Ronan's ship. But a lot of these other things probably went right over the head. They have no idea what they're talking about. And that's something we were mentioning before. So do not feel alone in that, Tim. Do not feel alone in that whatsoever, because you are in the majority, I believe. I believe you, sir, are in the majority. All right. Final question and comment of the day comes to us from Jonathan Morales, who writes, hey, John, what is your percentage that Sylvie makes it out alive in the next episode? Somebody asked a similar question that a little bit earlier, where they said the over-under was 30%. And I said over 30% that she dies. But how much over? I'm going to say, because you're asking, Jonathan, what's the percentage that Sylvie makes it out alive? I'm going to say there is a 60% chance she makes that out alive. I think 40% chance she dies, 60% chance she makes it out alive. And then of that 60%, there's a chance that she may make it out alive, but she actually turns bad and turns on our Tom Hiddleston Loki. But yeah, I will right now sit on 40% she dies, 60% she makes it out alive, one way or the other. So we'll find out. And all right, guys. With that down, we are now through all the comments and everything that you guys sent in for our Loki episode 5 open spoiler discussion. I was a little bit let down by this episode, I'm not going to lie, but there was certainly some big highlights, and it just sets up for what's going to be a very eventful episode 6 that I cannot wait for. Hey guys, thanks a lot for being here and watching this video. Special thanks to all you guys who sent in those observations, thoughts, critiques, and everything. Number one, because you gave us great fun things to talk about. But number two, you supported this channel as you did, and all of us involved with the John Campea channel. Thank you guys so much for your support. Okay, guys, that'll do it for me. Remember, we will have on Tuesday our Loki finale pregame show, and then on Wednesday, our final Loki open spoiler discussion. I cannot wait for those. Thanks a lot for being here, guys. My name's John Campea, and until next time, my friends, bye-bye.